Welcome to the channel, everyone. I'm Amedio602, and we're going to have another video about packet burst today. The first video about this topic I made a couple of months ago. It's done really well on the channel. Unfortunately, it did not solve all the issues for all the players. So today I'm coming at you with about a dozen more things you can try to help solve your packet burst issues in Call of Duty Warzone. Before I do that, I do want to give a quick refresher on what is packet burst, as well as a few common causes of it.
I'm getting a bunch of packet bursts.
I am too.
Consistent, like it's staying on my screen.
You know you're experiencing packet burst when you get 3 rectangles on the left side of your screen. Sometimes they're yellow, sometimes they're orange. When you see this icon, that means that your game is processing packets in an irregular manner. A good way to visualize this is to think of a clock with a second hand that doesn't work quite right. The second hand on a clock is supposed to move once per second, but just imagine if sometimes that clock would take 1.5 seconds to tick, and sometimes it would tick twice back to back. And the reason it feels so horrible is that when your game's processing, if you don't have a smooth frame rate, if you've got something like tick, 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 then what's going to happen is your game is going to stutter and it's just going to feel awful. And that's why packet burst is such a major issue. Lots of different things could cause packet burst. You could have an issue with your local processing, you could have an issue somewhere on the network, or the issue could be in the server. Unfortunately, there's only one icon that tells us the symptom that we're experiencing, so we don't know the exact problem. But today, we're going to go through a list of 20 things that you can do to try to minimize packet burst.
Dude.
The very first thing you should do is you should be playing on a wired connection. There are other reasons to avoid Wi-Fi, but packet burst is just another reason to be playing on a wired connection if you aren't already. I recommend using at least a Cat5e network cable. If you're in a place without a wired connection and you absolutely can't run network cable through your house, then you can also try a power line adapter. These are really neat. I used these for a long time back in my old house before I moved into this one, and it lets you use your home's electrical wiring as network wires. It's worth knowing that this won't work in all scenarios, but it's worth a shot. Amazon affiliate link in the description down below. For console players, I would also recommend having Warzone installed on your internal hard drive. Don't use an external hard drive or a thumb drive because the speeds are just not going to be as fast as the internal drive. For PC players, I recommend installing the game to an SSD if possible. If you're playing on PlayStation, you can also rebuild the database. You can do this by hooking a controller up to the system, booting into safe mode, and then selecting Rebuild Database. I haven't actually tried this on a PS4 to see if this solves packet burst, but it seems like something that could have a positive impact. If you try it, let me know in the comments down below. Did rebuilding the database on a PS4 help with your packet burst issue or not? Jumping back over to the network, it's also a really good idea to minimize network use as much as possible. In other words, don't have your phone, your tablet, your Chromebook, 3 laptops all on different YouTube and Netflix pages while you're trying to game. That's just not a good idea. And if you absolutely cannot avoid having other traffic on the network, then I'd recommend picking up a good gaming router, or at least a router with some good gaming QoS settings. I personally use a Netduma R2 gaming router, but that's not the only good gaming router out there. Pick one within your budget, and if you're having trouble deciding, I've got links to a few in the description down below. Depending on where you live, you might also be able to try out a new ISP. Not all ISPs are created equal, and if you've got an option for fiber, that would definitely help improve your network connection over something like cable or DSL. That covers my suggestions for console players. All of those things also, of course, apply to PC players, and for the PC players out there, I've got an additional list of different things you can try to get rid of this silly packet burst. But first, I want to tell you a story. Before Season 3 dropped, when I made the original packet burst video, I was really happy with the performance I was getting out of Warzone, and then Season 3 came out, and my performance just went in the tank. The game would crash with multiple memory errors, I tried rolling back my drivers, I tried several different things. And finally, as a last resort, I chose to scan and repair my game files. And that was a huge mistake because that ended up getting stuck in an infinite loop, so as soon as the scan finished, it would say it needed to repair some files. But it wouldn't repair anything as far as I could tell, it just looped over and over again until I finally canceled it, and then the game was in a bad state, so I had to reinstall the whole game. This was kind of a blessing in disguise though, because after I reinstalled the game and started it back up, I saw a lot less packet burst. So for anybody on PC, if you just uninstall and reinstall the game, that might help your packet burst issues. Your mileage may vary on this one. I feel like I just got lucky, And I feel that way because I do get packet burst quite a bit on PS5, and I tried uninstalling and reinstalling on the PS5, but I'm still seeing packet burst over there. That takes me to the next thing that you can do outside the game, and this is the advoptions.ini file that we talked about in the first video. My recommendation for the video memory scale is 0.65 for most GPUs. And if you try 0.65 and your packet burst is gone and your game looks good, then that's great. You can stop there. If you do still get packet burst with 0.65, go ahead and try 0.6, then 0.55, and then 0.5. Just be aware that while you're doing this, you should go into the graphics tab of the settings and make sure that your VRAM usage is not in the red. There have also been quite a few questions about the renderer worker count, and different values work better for different people. I recommended using the same number as your number of logical cores on your CPU, and for most setups that would be my recommendation. But I invite you to open up that file, change values around, restart the game, and see how it behaves for you. There was also a comment in the last video about setting the config cloud storage enabled to 0. I did this, and I feel like that helped my packet burst just a little bit. You can also delete the advoptions.ini file to force the game to regenerate a new one the next time it starts. Big shout out, I'm not sure if this is IRXD or LRXD, but thanks for the comment, I really appreciate it. Speaking of comments, if you've got some uber way to get rid of the packet burst, then please let me know in the comments down below. I'd really appreciate it, as would everyone else watching the video. This would also be a good time to hit like if you're enjoying the video so far, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Once you're done liking and subscribing, check your antivirus software. You may need to put in an exception for Call of Duty Modern Warfare. The same is true for any malware scanner you might be using. Another thing you can try is updating your drivers, especially your graphics card drivers. I am using an NVIDIA RTX 2070, and I've tried drivers version 461.72 and 466.27. Both of those are working fine for me right now without a lot of packet burst. I should also mention that occasional packet burst is expected. We're not trying to get 100% here because this is the real world. We are going to have network latency issues. We are going to have server-side issues. You're not going to get this fixed 100%, but the goal here is to minimize it as much as possible, because some people, myself included, were seeing packet burst so much that the game was just virtually unplayable. And speaking of consistency, this would also be a good time to run a benchmark on your PC. There are a lot of good benchmarks out there. The one that I really like is userbenchmark.com, and I like it for a few reasons. First of all, it's really easy to use. You just go to the webpage, download it, and hit run. If you're on a laptop or anything with multiple GPUs, you may have to go into the laptop settings and change it to run on a discrete graphics card. The test takes about 5 minutes to run. Once it finishes, you'll see a web page open up and it will show you your hardware and how your machine compares to other similarly spec'd hardware. On the screen, you can see one of my benchmark runs, and the thing to look for here is the percentile for each of your components. Looking at the test results on the screen, you can see that my processor scored in the 85th percentile, my graphics card scored in the 97th percentile, my SSD scored in the 83rd percentile, and my RAM scored in the 60th percentile. These are pretty good numbers, and I'm pretty proud to share these, because looking at this, even though I may not have the hottest machine on the market, my machine is performing very well given the components in it. If you have any components that are scoring below expectations, this website's also pretty good about giving you some general tips for how to speed those components up. Some common mistakes that new system builders might make would be forgetting to enable XMP or DOCP in the BIOS, and this is going to make your RAM run a lot slower. Another common mistake would be to be running your PC in power saver mode while gaming. Simple things like these can have a major impact on your gaming, and especially the consistency of your game. For example, if your antivirus software starts running while you're playing Warzone, you're definitely going to run into a problem. And what we're trying to do here is run benchmarks a few different times and get consistent scores. Speaking of RAM, there's a program out there called ISLC. I have not personally tried it, but we had some comments down below in the last video that make me think this definitely could help you out, especially if you're running into issues with system memory. The reason I haven't tried it is my machine has 32 gigabytes of RAM and I have a lot of free memory. My basic understanding of ISLC is that it frees up memory that is no longer being used. I'm over on Twitter quite a bit. By the way, feel free to follow me at Amedio602 on Twitter. One of the people that I follow on Twitter, I believe the name is pronounced Kerneal. I'm not 100% sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, so if that's wrong, please let me know. And Kerneal does a lot of PC optimizations for the pro players out there, and he tweets out very insightful things. Most of his tweets have to do with optimization, and he likes to be known as the optimization guy. You can definitely follow him and his company, Sense Quality, on Twitter, and specifically, he tweeted out the other day that KB5001330 and KB5001337 could cause performance issues in Windows. You can consider uninstalling these. Please be aware that these are security vulnerability patches, so you may be leaving your machine vulnerable if you choose to do this. One of the other things you can do if you're trying to get rid of your packet burst if you suspect a problem on your local PC is to try playing on lower settings. Running on lower settings means you're not going to be taxing your system quite as much, so you might be able to get a more consistent frame rate. Just keep in mind that the packet burst you're seeing may or may not have to do with network and may have to do with your local machine. But if you're convinced that you've got an issue with your network and you can't do anything else, then you could try out a gaming VPN. I've never used one of these before, but there are a lot of videos out on YouTube that'll help you out with this. If you'd like more technical tips, tricks, and tactics like these, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on my future uploads. And as always, thank you very much for watching.